Ladies and gentlemen, ATDF everything in that shelf presentation. You're now rocking with TDF everything. Spoiled Rotten.
Spoiler alert.
Welcome and welcome back, everybody.
Hey.
It's me, Daniel,
And this is Ben.
on Spoiled Rotten.
On that shelf.
Boom. Well, we've got a new Marvel thing to talk about, so everyone should be happy. We're here to talk about Echo, which is this is like a experiment Marvel's doing with that sounds bad, but it does seem like this Marvel Spotlight thing is something they're trying out to be like, hey, it's not connected, even though the show desperately wants you to know
it's heavily connected, which is that was my whole thing. Is like, oh, I see what they're trying to do here. That's kind of could work. And then toward the end of the show, I'm like, why did you do that? Why didn't you just put a regular Marvel banner behind it? Because there's no point in making this a spotlight. I feel like the werewolf, the Halloween one was more of a spotlight than this is.
I think that was my overall thought, is that this needed to be more like Werewolf by Night.
Yes.
I think I want to choose my words carefully, because I don't want to fall into the trap of what I've accused other people of doing, which is I didn't fully understand the content, so it's bad. I think this must be important to a supergroup of people, that they don't have to be Choctaw or Native American. Like, this could still just be beneficial in for many reasons, but everything that the character of Maya encompasses could mean something to a bunch of people and have references to things that I haven't experienced, so it goes over my head. So I don't think this is without merit or something that's bad. I don't think it worked for me, and I think that came down more to story decisions and less of me thinking like, oh, this is nothing, because I think obviously there's a bunch of stuff going on here, and it's a very rich text for you to pull things from. I think a lot of it went over my head, and so anytime I'm criticizing it, it has to do with story decisions that were made that didn't really work for me, and not like, where were all the white people, or where were all the black people? It's not that.
It would shock me if that was your take from this. It's one of those. I completely, very much agree with that. Is the idea of like, I think this is decisions by committee reasons why these things didn't work, and I'm sure like the creator of the show fought very hard to keep the things that are very, very important in, but as a result of that, it's just like, here's highlight reels of what we are supposed to care about without actually having the ability to care about it in any real capacity from Maya's perspective. And that's difficult.
I feel like my big criticism is, we watched 5 episodes and I felt like I got like 1.5 episodes worth of content.
Yes.
Like, I felt like, oh, this didn't like I know people really like the first episode because Daredevil's in it, but it really felt like, well, we're just watching stuff from Hawkeye. And I'm not feeling like I have more insight into this stuff. I feel like I got it when I saw it in Hawkeye. So now, in a show where they're supposed to be able to be like, hey, this isn't really connected, they're desperately begging me to be like, look, it's connected, so you like it, right? And I'm like, wait, but you're just showing me what I already watched. This isn't like new angles. It's literally just the footage from Hawkeye, a show I didn't really like. But like, at least it's stuff, the characters I liked from Hawkeye. But like, I was just like, I don't know why we wasted an episode on this.
Yeah, it's this is a bit of a challenge I have right now with where MCU currently is. In the past, where Kevin Feige has said like, oh, people are going to really need to study up on this material, really need to know what's going on. This is one of those situations where I'm like, all of episode 4 was a previously on like Echo's like summarized story and all that kind of stuff. Here are the things that were important up until then. Here's how we sprinkled her in to the whole MCU. and it felt like it was hand holding us to be like, this is why she's important and this is why you're watching the thing. So it kind of goes back on that whole like promise of you're going to need to know what has happened previously, because it really didn't seem that way. And I
Yeah.
agree what you said, like that whole, and I'm glad that you brought up the Hawkeye thing of it too, because I think one of the cool things that Hawkeye does, a show that again I'm not a big fan of, is when they showed you the Battle of New York from a different perspective and how
Hmm.
it impacted those characters. Here, it didn't do that. It was just like, here are the scenes from Hawkeye
Like it's
that
literally
was
just the
relevant.
scenes. We didn't
Yeah,
recreate anything. You're just watching the scenes again.
yeah. There was no different perspective whatsoever to change anything, because all the story beats and all the conclusion beats and all that kind of stuff was concluded in Hawkeye. So bringing it back up in this capacity for such a long time too. Like I was like, oh, we're doing the full scene. We're not just doing a bit
Yeah.
of it, and then they're like, oh, you remember what happens, kind of thing. They did the full thing. And I'm like, what is going on with this first episode? It didn't feel
Yeah.
good to me.
I did not like that part of the first episode.
Mhm.
Another thing, and maybe this is the reason I didn't think the show really worked for me, and this is, I'm not saying it's a good reason or a smart reason. Devry Jacobs, who we talked about during What If, plays Bonnie, and I'm just like, what? What was the point of this character?
Yeah.
I felt like they teased in the first episode like how connected she is to Bonnie, and she literally has like two interactions with Bonnie throughout the season, and
Yeah.
she's more working with Biscuits, who doesn't show up in the first episode, but like in that flashback in the first episode,
Yeah.
the ADR like, oh, Biscuits gonna be sad that he misses this, and you're like, okay, I don't know who Biscuits is, and then he comes, and you're like, oh, that's Biscuit, but like the whole thing was, look at how close these sisters are. I mean, they're cousins, but they're so close, and
Mhm.
you think basically anything Biscuits does in this series would have gone to Bonnie, but no.
I agree with that heavily, because I'm just
And
like,
so
oh,
it's just like,
they really sidebarred Bonnie's character in this.
and I was like, what is the point of Bonnie? And not, I wish they wrote her out. I wish Biscuits was in it so that Bonnie could have been something. I just really liked Everett Jacobs as an actor, and I'm
Yep.
not saying that the actor who played Biscuits is bad. I think he's actually pretty fun, but he
Mhm.
felt like he was in a completely different show, unless he was with Maya. Like that whole like, hey, I'm selling my PS4 stuff. I'm like, what
What are we
is?
doing
And there
here?
might have been a point to it, but I just was like, I'm checked out because I don't care about him selling his PS4.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like I get it. It's talking about the poverty in that area and all that kind of stuff, which is like my assumption is if you have a PS4, you care very much about it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's a big sacrifice. But again, it's one of those things I'm like, why is this being explored through Biscuits?
Mm-hmm.
It's way more impactful if we explore this through Bonnie, who is resentful of Maya, but still trying to work that out and all of those kind of things, and being like, okay, well, I'm going to sacrifice something that is meaningful to me to support Maya, hoping that she like that. To me is
Yeah.
such a better story beat than like, oh, he's going to give up his VSI. I'm like, because I'm like, as much as I know what that means to a person and their video games and all that kind of stuff, it doesn't mean anything in the context of the show.
Yeah, I would agree. I think people will understand. Oh, he's giving up a prized possession. It's just more like, but why are we focusing on him? And to the point of like, you see Bonnie grown up in the first episode, but she doesn't get any lines, and then like, and you're like, what are we doing here? I just was confused by that choice. And my other thing was, it's not a ultimately not a big deal because, like, I mean, it isn't actually how it happens in the comics, but she shot Kingpin point blank in the face and thought he was dead.
Yeah.
But like, one, the way she's moving makes it seem, it kind of belies the fact that she clearly knows he's alive. Like, I'm like, you wouldn't move like this if you thought he was actually dead. Like, you're acting like you're still running from him.
Yep.
Like, I don't know. Like, that didn't work for me. And also, he just had like a scratched face. I feel like he should just not have an eye.
Yeah, I agree. It's when they pull that off and they're just they're just leaving it off. Oh, he just got a couple of scars into the face. Like what happened there? To me, I'm like, that is so egregious to be like, they're not really explaining this. It's not like they gave him some sort of serum or something like that, or
unless they're being like, look, our Kingpin is a mutant. Like he's gonna get shot with a rocket launcher. He's gonna get up. He's gonna get shot in the eye. and it's just gonna kind of mess up the skin around his eye.
Yeah.
I just it didn't that took me out of it a
Yeah.
bit.
I agree.
But the first two things I mentioned are actually the two things that really got to me. Just the amount of story I thought was actually told, and how they dealt with Bonnie, considering how much I like that actor and how much the story wants you to care about Bonnie and Maya.
Right. I very, very much agree. They're like setting up all these different things with no actual payoff, no exploration of anything like that. The Bonnie of it all is one of the most disappointing things to the whole season, for me. And then the Kingpin stuff is just like, cool, but we're just gonna suspend reality right now. They're really not even gonna try to give away to explain, like you said, how invincible Kingpin seems to be. And it bothers me because like when people criticize things like, oh, Mary Jane in the Spider-Man 2 game is overpowered. I'm like, why are we not complaining about this? This is
I think people
like,
just like
so egregious.
Kingpin. I like, and I know some people are like, how come it took him so many hits to like not even kill the ice cream truck guy or what, or the vendor, like whatever that vendor was. But again, that plays more into like the power fantasy of like he should have killed him in one punch. This is just like I'm. It was a concern of mine, but I ultimately was like, I understand that people just like Kingpin and they just want him, so it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, it seems like this irrational blind sight where they're just like, oh, he's in the MCU proper now, so yay, good things are gonna happen. And I'm like, oh God, that's just you can't just let that paint the color for this. And because to me, the presence of Kingpin in this is egregious. I just didn't want Kingpin to be a part of any of this.
Yeah, I mean, people can listen to our Daredevil episodes. I don't love that show the way everyone else did. I think it's good, but it wasn't. And I don't mean this the way I talked about Aquaman. Like Aquaman, I don't like, but I understand people like it. I think Daredevil is good. It's just not my cup of tea in terms of the Netflix show. And I understand that people like, specifically that version of Kingpin in Wilson Fisk in Daredevil. So having him back with the same actor and in general the same operating style is exciting for people. But
and and I guess it's exciting for people because I did like that they're like, oh, he's like, they're doing the same story beats as the Kingpin in Daredevil, which does justify like the MCU proper, like the Daredevil and all that kind of stuff from the Netflix series, the Defenders and all that kind of stuff is MCU proper, which I'm like, oh God, there's still the whole like Iron Fist of it all that makes it actually canon now, which it was just like, that's the unpleasant side of it. But you're right, it's one of those things where I'm like, these characters never really worked for me. And then I felt they didn't have enough confidence in the show to be like, no, we need to make Kingpin a bigger part of this. And then because where the series ends, I'm like, okay, well, why are we now focusing on, like, we shifted real fast away from Maya to Kingpin. Like, what the hell?
Yeah.
And that's just
I again really like tying into like, look, now he's gonna just be in the MC. I mean, I guess I know certain rumors about how they plan to deploy Wilson Fisk, so I'm like, they're just not doing Spotlight then, because this might as well have just been a regular Disney Plus show.
Oh, I heavily agree. I heavily agree. I think they use the Spotlight thing to be like, hey, it's not up to quality, which sucks.
I think
and
the
I'm
opposite, actually. I think they were like, look, at Spotlight, so we could have a guy get shot up and choke on his own blood. Like, now watch it. And people did.
Yeah, and then that was all trailer bait, as far as I'm concerned. That
I agree. I'm just
saying,
I think a lot of people before they saw it thought like, oh, they're just trying to dump it. But I think everything about it was supposed to remind you of the violence of the Netflix era, even down to we're dropping it all at once.
100%.
I didn't think that was them trying to bury it. I think they already know that critically this is doing better than most things they've put out recently.
Right.
And by making it something new, like it's Spotlight, then people will think, oh, they did it differently then, and they will watch, and it worked for them. I don't think what they did leading up to this was to be like, ugh, we don't know what we're doing. I think it was like, we've got this thing and we really want people to watch it. This is how we're going to do it. And
Right.
everything we do is going to try and remind them of Netflix. They didn't wait on the Daredevil thing. He was right in the first episode.
Mhm.
And I'm not even saying like, oh, I wish he was in it more. Like, I don't even see a world where you could have him in it more. It made sense.
Yeah, there's
the
no
way he was in
plausible
it.
way. Yeah.
I thought it was a good fight, and then
Mhm.
he got out of there. And then the scene that follows kind of gives you the thing of Daredevil or Kingpin being like, all right, so like, how was that exercise for you? Like, and kudos to you. You stood up to Daredevil. Great. I
Mhm.
trust you. What do you think?
Yeah, just knowing that the Kingpin is just manipulating everything behind the scenes is just like, oh, you're just gonna say that to say that. Like, if she died, you wouldn't have cared. You're like, you just,
No,
just
I
straight up.
mean, I don't know how I think they're doing Thanos stuff. Like, I think this is Kingpin, Echo, Thanos, Gamora. I think that's what they're doing. So I do think he cares. But that doesn't mean I'm like, oh, that's a nice relationship. Like, that's a relationship she needs to break out of. But I do think he likes her. Like, and love. Sorry, I guess I said like because I didn't want it to seem romantic. He does love her, but he is a messed up person. So that love, him saying that doesn't really mean what it means if we said that. Like,
yes, absolutely. It's very much it makes me think like from a real world perspective, like a Don King, Mike Tyson kind of situation where it's like, all right, this love is based on use, abuse, and all that kind of stuff, and all those. And as long as we're aligned, then we're good. But if not, then I'm tear you apart and everything you love and all that kind of stuff. So it's heavily conditional love, which it's to be expected from Kingpin.
Mm-hmm.
It's just weird that the show just clearly didn't get to do what it actually wanted to do.
Yeah, I think that's the overall thing. But I guess we can go more in depth now.
Yeah,
the first episode,
this longest previously on thing,
so
in my opinion.
So each episode is the name of a strong woman in Choctaw history. I like that conceptually.
Yes.
I thought they could have leaned into that a bit more. Just like, I know I said we were going to talk about the first episode, but I think it's the fourth episode. Maybe it's the fifth. Basically, when she's talking to her mom, and the mom is like, like you Echo, you've got the like, strategy, ferocity, just cunning, love of like your family. I'm like, yeah, the mom love thing, they proved that, like with her healing the bird and being like, hey, why would you hurt a living thing? But when they got to like ferocity of I guess her name's Tafa, I was just like, I mean, I guess I can meet you more than halfway and be like, she must have been ferocious because she led the Choctaw people, but like that wasn't really what they showed of that character. So it feels like I'm missing something I should have seen. And also, again, speaking to what I said up top, that might just be an assumption everyone understands if they are part of this culture or have studied it better than I have. And so maybe that's just on me. But it just felt like moments like that where they're kind of like, it's this, and this. I'm like, yeah, I understand how that was set up. I don't think it fully stuck the landing for me. I think like we probably needed to lean on that a bit more.
Yeah, I agree with you there. It was a situation where I'm like, you're telling us, you're not showing us. It's because you didn't actually show us the ferocity aspect of it, and because like
even
the ferocity aspect
to me, I was just like, yeah, she won the game, like the stickball game, but like, I don't like she didn't lead the team, but like I didn't watch her like call a play or something. I was just kind of like, she knows what she needs to do.
I agree. It's just like it was very much everything relies on my shoulders as opposed to like, and there was nothing special about it. It was just like, okay, I get knocked down, I get up again. And that was just, which is ferocity. I get that, but there's nothing unique about that in that situation. If both tribes in that stickball game were fighting for the right to stay a part of the tribe and all that kind of stuff, then I would expect both sides to be ferocious in that.
Well, no,
game.
that was strategy. So I was just like,
oh, that was strategy.
Yeah,
I see.
That one. Sorry, I don't want to say that one. That character's name who's represented strategy was Loak.
Well, okay, I see. In which case, I'm like, I don't know what the strategy was in the stickball game.
Yeah, I think again, this is me selfishly saying it because I don't have as much literacy in this storytelling
Yes.
and these stories
Hmm.
is to the extent that we keep seeing the people she echoes, like I would like more than just their introduction. Like they do one time where the cunning woman appears right before she shoots someone after building a gun, and you're like,
Hmm.
yeah, I get what it's like. I would maybe it felt more like Maya was interested in these characters or had like more of a visions and like more of them coming to her. I think
Hmm.
it would have helped me feel more immersed. I think, and not because um Maya signs, because I would say even in a movie I didn't really like, Eternals, I felt like I understood the what was her character's name? It's Lauren Ridloff's character, but like, I don't remember.
Makari.
Yeah, like I felt like I got Makari, like I was
Yes.
in on what she was doing. For this, I just felt like I know by design she's put at a distance from you, but she is our lead
Mhm.
in a 5 episode show, so it just felt like there's moments where she not tells jokes, but she has quips, and I know people don't like quips, but like just like when she's like, well, is she going to sew me up or put me in the ground, or like is she, or
Right. And
when she's
yeah.
talking to Scully and she's like, don't worry, I'll just cover it up when I'm riding my motorcycle, like just like those little bits of character, so they don't
Mhm.
have to be quips, but just anything but the stoicism. I think I needed a bit more of that coming out from her.
I agree. I wish. I think one thing the first episode does really, really well is that first initial flashback of the origin of the Choctaw and then them going into the tent where they're talking about it. I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, I thought what would have been stronger is if they had a version of that for each one of the women that they're talking about, right? They
Yeah,
had that
like
for
Maya
Shafa,
engaging
Loak,
with
and
it. Yeah.
yeah, like I thought that would have been effective, but they didn't do that. I mean, like sure, like Loak, they show the stickball thing that's sufficient for it, but then Tuklo and Taloa, it just it didn't work that way. And the final one is Maya, so it's just like, wait, that's her. So what? Like
Well, I
I thought
mean,
there was supposed to be
they
five.
did say you just have the 4 things, so to
Oh, it's
end on
four,
Maya
not
makes
five. See,
sense to me. To be
sure,
like, and now you've got them all in one person. That made
yeah.
sense to me.
Because
Um,
I think what's interesting about this too, and again, I'm not, uh, I don't know the First Nations history and all that kind of stuff, but what is abundantly clear to me is the verbal history that they pass on to one another. So why is it that each one of her family members and all that kind of stuff didn't tell different stories of these different women that would have made it a little bit more clear? If that would have been a better show, not tell the whole like way of life of that kind of those the tribe and all those kind of stuff, right? And it's so to me it's weird that they didn't get to do that.
mhm. Yeah, and I don't know what it looks like. I just felt like I was kept at a distance for some of this stuff, and I understand it used to be 6 episodes. They brought it down to 5.
Yep.
I've seen people who think it worked just fine, and as I
Ooh.
said, I don't think they're wrong for feeling that way. I'm just like, it just didn't work that way for me, and I'm happy that it worked for people. I'm happy that people like it, because I do think more shows like this need to be given, not Marvel spotlight, but given the spotlight. Like I do think there should be more shows like this. I thought it's what I like about Res Dogs, which there's a lot of actors from Res Dogs in this
Mhm.
show, and it's just stories from people that I haven't been able to hear stories from on a regular basis.
Yeah.
Um, so it doesn't have to be superhero related. This is, so I was hoping to like it a bit more, but I'm I like, and when I say that, I don't mean like there aren't anyone telling these stories. I just mean like put with this much support from the big company behind
Right.
it. That's what I mean. Like that it's got the polish and it's got the push, um, so that other people can see themselves,
Yeah.
and I can. I know this all sounds selfish, but like the art that's put out is more like it broadens my horizons more.
Right. I don't think that's selfish. I think that's just the idea of because the reality is like there's so many people complaining like, oh, I can connect with this character. I can just because they're not white men,
Mm-hmm.
like so the idea of like your ability to connect with a character shouldn't be dependent on your ability to see yourself as that character, but to be able to connect with the emotions or what that person's
Mm-hmm.
going through. And I think that's the fundamental beauty of storytelling, is that it does has that ability to transcend race, but then also, and race and culture, but then also show and highlight how race and culture fundamentally manipulate and impact those thoughts and feelings, right?
Hmm.
So I don't think it's selfish when you say like I would have liked to explore this more, because it's 100% true. Where is there other kind of media in that way, done in this kind of lens? We don't have that. This is exactly what we want from diversity, right? It just sucks that people can't see past themselves in order to see the emotion of a human being, and that
Yeah, and I
sucks.
mean, unfortunately, I don't think they gave enough time for the emotion. I
Oh,
know
they
that she
didn't. Yeah.
has some key moments, like
Mhm.
a moment, and it's not actually her yelling. I know she doesn't yell, but
Mhm.
emotionally yelling at her grandmother, like, "No, you chose yourself." Like, I like that moment, but it's
Mhm.
when I think it is her uncle, like her dad's brother, her uncle
Yeah.
Henry, when he's like, "Oh, like you don't realize what like the pain you're causing your loved ones." I'm like, that's a fucked up thing to say to someone who was in a car accident with their mom and like not saw but like was there when her dad was murdered. Like I think she does understand, but I thought that was a nice complex thing they had there, but it's not really. I think they set up a bunch of interesting avenues, so hopefully they have another season to keep telling the story. But it was just like the Bonnie thing was an interesting thing they could have done that they kind of dropped,
Yeah.
and that thought process of Henry, even her grandmother, realistically, like those three characters, like whereas I see Bonnie's point of like I was legitimately there for you. Like everyone else was just like, yeah, Maya's gone 20 years. I'm texting you, I'm actively reaching out to you, and you're
Mhm.
just giving me nothing.
Yep.
And Maya has good points with her uncle and grandmother of like, well, you didn't try to help me. You just let me go because you thought it was too painful to look at me. And it's like that's an interesting thing of Maya rightfully telling certain characters you chose yourself, and then having
Mhm.
a character being like, and you're choosing yourself when it comes to me, like I needed you, like, but it's
Yeah.
not fully explored. It's kind of just there, and
Yeah.
it has
It's
to make way for the kingpin of it all.
I agree. It's like, hey, we have to rush through these things because we have to set up the whole Kingpin as mayor kind of situation, and that really, really does suck, because they're and this is the thing I liked about Phase Four, is how different characters work through grief and loss,
Hmm.
right? And this is clearly in that same spirit, but they don't give enough time to air it out, even though they have 5 episodes to do it, which is just heavily disappointing to me, because they're just like, no, we need to establish the fact that this character's power is different than in the comics, but then we're not going to explain it very, very well either. Which
Well,
I'm
they
just like,
took out like she was gonna have like tattoos at the end that like
yeah,
two power, and they took all of that out,
hmm,
and it's like, well, I don't know. I mean, I don't think that was the right choice. I think, yeah, that's what I meant about like 1.5 episodes, because it feels like we get the payoff of you saw the four ancestors,
hmm,
or sorry, the three and her mom, and then it's her. But I'm like, I don't know. Like, I feel like you could have done that in 2 episodes. You probably could have done it in one episode, realistically,
100%.
given the amount of time you actually spent on trying to develop those ideas. You could have done that in one episode, but I generously say 1.5, because I think there is like there's still the kingpin of that doesn't really work within her learning about how to harness the four
Right.
gifts she has. So yeah, I even at 5 episodes, I'm like, yeah, you could have done more, or do what Werewolf by Night did, which is like, we're just gonna give you like 45-minute banger. Here you
Yeah,
go. Like,
100%.
if you want more, maybe you'll see her again.
Because I agree, if they just stuck to like a here's a 1 hour kind of thing that we're just going to drop on you and that's it, I'd be like, okay, at least it makes sense why it feels like everything's rushed. But in this, it feels like we're dragging to get to the parts that are rushed,
Hmm.
and it just doesn't work for me. And everything that I wanted them to expand on, it just didn't have the capacity to do so, right? And it's just like, it's a show that clearly had so many hands in the pot, like so many chefs in the kitchen, that it just, they were worried about the wrong thing. And when I say they, I mean the board of directors or whoever had signed off
Yeah,
on final cut.
not Sydney Freeland
No,
and
not
Marion Barry.
Hurdle.
Yeah, like yeah, I think someone came along and was like, "Ah, we gotta chop this up." But
Yeah, we got to make this palatable so that, the target audience, white people, don't feel bad about this. And I'm like, oh, is that the right message right now?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I think there's. I know. I feel like like I said, let's do it by episodes, but we haven't done that so far. But the other thing I want to bring up before we do that was, I think they did touch on some interesting things, like when the grandmother was like, "Yeah, I left the hospital to give birth to your mom, like with my sisters," and I'm like, they're not explicitly saying, but that is, and I remember here in Canada where they caught a nurse like mocking a native woman while she was like dying in bed,
Yes.
and it's like, yeah, I would rather not be in the hospital system. They're doing it too in True Detective Night Country. There's like instance of like being like promising like, okay, don't worry, I won't take you to the hospital if anything goes wrong, because they're dealing with people who are living in and indigenous people in Alaska and stuff. And it's like, yeah, it's real life things, but it just feels like they weren't allowed to fully embrace all of that the
Yeah,
way other shows I've seen embrace it.
absolutely. Yeah, they because I mean, because then they would have had to be like, oh, it's just uh the whole colonialized structure of healthcare in general, and that means that we have to target the nurses there too,
Mm-hmm.
and then this, and then this, which means it's like all white people, not just white men, which is what the show is clearly putting the pin on. It's like anytime you see a white man, yeah, they're gonna fuck shit up, all that kind of stuff. But
The what's his face, like, Vicky had two white women helping him out,
right,
and they were like irredeemable.
yeah, they're irredeemable. But it's just like one of those things that's just like, okay, well, that doesn't mean that doesn't exist in the healthcare system,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
all that kind of
they
stuff. And
sanitized that for sure.
yeah, exactly. They did heavily, heavily so. And that was one of the parts where I'm like, oh, yeah, you got censored here. Like, I'm sure like Sydney had something very, very much so that explored that a lot more. How people of color and especially indigenous people do not trust these systems because historically these systems have been the result of, or the propelling factor of, a lot of the genocide aspects
Mm-hmm.
of the First Nations people, right? So it's just, of course, and that is so significant, but it made it seem like, oh, no, 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 we know better than them, and instead of, no, that they must have been terrified to even have to go to the hospital in the first place, right? So
Or even if
them
they
pulling back on
weren't,
those
their
things,
experience in the hospital made them like, I gotta go.
yeah,
I can't be here.
yeah, exactly. Like when people were like, no hospitals, I'm like, there's good solid reason there, and they're not trying to be like, there's good solid reason there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Even if nothing's going to happen to them, but what's going to happen to the baby? Like, what are they going to do? Are they going to do these things that they didn't
Or
sign
being like,
off
yeah,
on
they
or
have
approve
higher
of?
tolerance for
Yeah,
pain, like, and not taking it seriously if you're like, I need some medication.
yeah, or some really messed up stuff was like it, like in the situation of like, if it was a boy that was born, it's like, oh yeah, we circumcised them for you, so you don't
Mm.
have to worry about that. It's like, well, what? No, you mutilated our baby. We no, like that kind of bullshit, right? But yeah, it's they really didn't. They pumped the brakes to make it as palatable as possible for the white audience, which sucks because that's there's a lack of authenticity at that point.
Yeah. So yeah, I guess the first episode, as we said, it's showing you what happened.
Mm-hmm.
I believe they're showing you during the blip, like that Maya was kind of given this opportunity to work for Kingpin as an
Mm-hmm.
adult, but we already knew from Hawkeye that she always wanted to work there, and her dad was like, "No, you need to focus on school."
Mm-hmm.
You see that most likely, no, I guess it isn't Kingpin that killed her mom. It was a rival, because I don't think the dad would have kept working for Kingpin, because he says, I took
Right.
care of it.
Yep.
So it would have, who knows? Either way, yeah, you like, her mom was the victim of like mob violence as well.
Yep.
And um yeah, you're just building up the idea that she got what she wanted when she was like, "Yep, I'm gonna work with the Kingpin. That's what my dad did. That's what my uncle did or does." And this, and yeah, you're basically just seeing how she gets trained up. I think the other thing I heard was like they were definitely not gonna just make her a good guy in this show, and I don't know. I felt like there was so many instances where she could have been seen to be shown like more like Ronan was, where it's just
Yeah.
like, oh, like she's lethal. Like she'll take people out if it's an inconvenience to her. She's
Mhm.
not gonna care about human life. But I think she was just a good guy in this. I don't really.
Oh, straight up. Yeah, they don't know how to play that line very, very well at all. Because yeah, because it's in episode 2 that you start to get like the sense of like, oh yeah, she's a bad guy, in the sense where she's like,
oh, I'm taking over.
yeah, it's like, oh, there's a power gap here, and I'm taking over as queen, and I'm just like, cool. There's a point to this show, and then they completely U-turn away from that concept.
Because it's like, I'm gonna blow up his army. I'm like, again, why wouldn't you just step in there and being like, I took the king out, I shot him in the face, he's dead.
Yeah,
Hey, you work for me now.
yeah.
Otherwise,
So much
like,
more
it just, her actions always felt like she was like trying to take him down.
Yep.
And I'm like, but if you really wanted to take over, you wouldn't want your forces to be depleted.
Yeah, it's just like, wait, why are you blowing up ammunition? You would have used that for your own crime purposes. Like, what? It just feels like she knows that King. Like, and you said this earlier too.
Yeah.
It feels like she's like still trying to one up him,
Yeah.
and she doesn't know that he's alive at this point yet, which is
Almost
stupid.
so that I had to like rewatch the season to be like, oh right, she didn't know. Okay.
Yeah.
Like I was just the first time I watched it through, I'm like, yeah, like she knows he's alive. She's hiding from him. She knows he's coming for her. I'm like, no, that's not how they wrote it. They wrote it to be that she's genuinely surprised he's not dead.
Yep, and that's it's something. They did something there for sure.
Yeah, just a slip up. But I think the first 2 episodes, I think people think are strong. I don't know. I
There was
again,
direction to them, at least. There was definitely it was clear where they were trying to take it. And then episode 3, Tuklo, is where they do kind of start to abandon that.
What happened? Okay, 3 is the roller rink debacle.
Yeah.
So that's Vicky finally calling in, being like, yeah, Maya is here, and you meet. Is Zane from Hawkeye?
I don't know.
He just looks familiar.
He does look familiar.
Zane is like the kingpin, like go between, and he's gonna kill everyone. And then Kingpin calls and saves them.
And I gotta say, that guy that turns her in and rats her out and all that kind of stuff, what a dummy.
Yeah, he
like,
sucks at it.
That guy sucks at his job. Like when his two when the 2 women that he was with start like making fun of him, I'm like, yeah, this guy's dumb.
And that they were like, they constantly have instances of being like, I knew something was up and you let it go. Like when she's like, look, she got out of her things. I told you I heard something. Or when she notices the ASL and so she goes out to get Bonnie.
Yeah.
And the other guy's just like, oh, what was that? Is anyone else coming? And the woman's like, obviously he gave her like a signal. I'm going to go get her.
Yeah. I'm just like, oh man, this guy is just so bad at this. He's bad at crime stuff because he's like, you're gonna pay me now, right? You're gonna pay me now. No, you pay me first. Dude, like, why would you?
I didn't think it was gonna work, but at least I was like, at least he's being clear. Like, I don't trust you. Like, I wasn't like, oh wow, he really knows how to talk his way into things. I was just like, at least he's not blindly like, yeah, here's all the information. I have no leverage.
Yeah, no, it felt like a weird situation where I'm like, okay, this guy clearly doesn't know what he's doing, but clearly these women in his life have told him, listen, this is what you need to make sure that you do. So everything he does feels disingenuous, and he gets killed for it. Which I'm like, good. Your character doesn't deserve to be alive. You're a little worm.
I think what I was saying, like, she doesn't kill anyone in this.
No, she really doesn't.
Yeah, she does during the flashback because she breaks that guy's back.
Yeah, but that's during the flashback. That's not this time frame.
To be clear, I don't think she kills anyone in the present timeline.
Correct.
Meaning, and again, the show never promised she was going to be a villain. I just heard she is a anti-hero in the comics, and if you're going to do it that she's fighting Daredevil, you think like, oh, and again, that was in the past. That didn't happen in the present timeline, but it was just like, yeah, like I thought that would have been interesting and also would have helped with the Bonnie stuff. Which it's not like the show doesn't do it, but she has opportunities to reach out to Bonnie and she just doesn't. Like, or she'll walk up to the diner and be like, nah, I'm not going to. But then it just feels like she's too scared instead of being the like person who is callous.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
Yeah, that's episode 3.
But I will say, every scene in the roller rink, in the roller disco and all that kind of stuff, I'm like, oh man, they're DJing some good
Yeah,
music here.
the music is always interesting in the roller rink.
It's great roller rink music. I'm like, I'm having a banging time, and I'm like, oh yeah, I should be enjoying this show, but I'm just enjoying the music.
Then episode 4 is the flashback to like, all right,
Yeah.
this is when Wilson
Kingpin,
like, picked
yeah.
her up as a girl, and they found each other, like kind of like the what's it called, Ellie and who's it from Last of Us? Joel. It's like kind of like the violence that he's like, he got violent in front of her and she accepted it and joined in on the violence, and he's like,
Yep.
great, okay, we work together. That
Yep.
Sure.
Yep.
So all that happens, and then she finally ends up with her mom. Like, you think it's gonna be something bad. Like she's like rushing. She's like, oh no, no, no! Like my family's gonna get out. But she has a conversation with the spirit of her mother, who reminds her that she is the legacy of the Choctaw people and her family in particular within the Choctaw like history. Which again, that's good stuff because it sets up a line in the finale. But it was just like, didn't really feel like we were focusing on this.
Yeah.
Before this scene.
Yeah, it was just like, oh yeah, we got to make sure that each one of the women gets a spotlight in the episodes and all that kind of stuff. And here's your turn.
Well, like, I just mean like it didn't really feel like Maya was concerned with what her legacy was.
Oh, absolutely.
And it didn't really feel like anyone was like, everyone was like, yeah, she's a bad person.
Yeah.
You're like,
in which case, like, that's a shame because it's such an easy setup too, where it's just like, in order to heal your future, you got to revisit your past, which this clearly does look into those kind of things, but doesn't have any interest in making her healed, because it's just like, okay, she finds out that Fisk is alive. Now she's abandoning the Queen thing, which would, like, that's disappointing. Like, why would you be like, oh, all right, well, I failed the first time killing him, so I'm just gonna not try again.
I think this is what I said. Like, I think it sets up the idea that she's like, your legacy is the legacy of violence. My legacy is like a legacy of protection. So no, I'm not gonna kill you, because that's just that is what she would be doing, is just be like replacing him and keeping his legacy going. But like, so she chose not to do that, and she chose to heal him. I mean, obviously it's not going to stick. We know that. But it's like, she put him in a place where he was by himself and had to sort things out for himself. He had to go visit his past. And he's shaken by that. He's like, oh, what'd you do to me? And we as the audience don't fully understand what she did to him either, because yes, we've seen her heal things with her like cross fingers, but then I didn't really understand how she was able to share that with her grandmother and Bonnie.
Yeah.
In the finale. And I don't like, Granny and Bonnie just kind of fight, and it's like, oh, I guess sure. Like, I don't know what we're doing. You didn't really lean into this either.
Yeah, and like, if there's any episode that made me feel like, oh yeah, she's not a hero, it's this, the final episode, the episode 5, Maya, where I'm like, for no reason, she just shoots a slingshot at a woodpecker. I'm like, what the, you psychopath! Like, that's the only
her
thing.
As a kid, and she learns her lesson, and it's like the woodpecker's there the whole show, like,
right. But no, my point of it is like, no, you're just gonna hurt animals without like any, and like, let's be honest here. You're growing up within a First Nations cultural context. My assumption here is that nature and all that kind of stuff is important to you. So the very nature, like, she's like, oh, I just want to see if I can hit it. I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, that's the evidence that she's a psychopath. That right there, like, that's the only kind of thing that makes me be like, oh yeah, she's not a hero. But everything else, literally, in this show is like, oh, she's clearly a hero.
Yeah.
It's so weird because you're like, oh, you're just hurting innocent animals, and then you're just, oh, that's the weirdest thing of all time.
It is, yeah. I think, as I said, the show never promised she was a bad guy, so it was an unfair criticism that I brought up. But it was just like, people around her don't like her. Like even like the choices the grandmother makes of like, yeah, take your daughter with you, and I understand that she said, "Oh, it's because you would have reminded me too much of your mom," but I'm like, I I just feel like if you're making that decision, you already weren't that like attached to her. You like for
I
you to
agree.
be cool with like, you take her.
I
You leave
very
and
much
you take,
agree.
because you would think her whole thing would be like, you got my daughter killed and you're gonna get my grandmother killed. Stay away from her. But no, she's like, yeah, just take her. I can't look at her.
Yeah, it's so. And don't get me wrong, I don't need every character to be perfect in regards to their like all that kind of stuff, but it makes no sense. It's just like I'm blaming you for my daughter's death, so you take my granddaughter away too. Like
Yeah,
what?
that doesn't make sense. But again, if they wanted to focus on any of that, we probably could have felt better about that decision. But it's
Yeah.
kind of, it happens so that you understand why Maya was gone for 20 years
Hmm.
and why she doesn't immediately go to see her grandmother. But it's just like her saying, "You just reminded me too much of your mom," doesn't gel with how
Yeah.
she talks about Maya, even though she hasn't seen her for 20 years.
Yeah. Yeah. Because like for Maya to be like, "Oh, you hate me based on what the misinformation my dad gave me, and all this kind of stuff," tracks is consistent. But
Mm-hmm.
like the way the grandmother acts is just like, "Oh no, this is just heavily inconsistent. This is so weird. What are we
Yeah.
doing here?"
Having said that, I would definitely watch a show about the grandmother and Scully like just
Yeah.
flirting with each other. I
Oh my God,
thoroughly
those
enjoyed
two are
every
so
time
much
they were
fun.
together.
I really liked how he was rizzing her up. That was just so much fun to me. I'm like, I like this actor a
It was also
lot.
just like an interesting thing of like, yeah, you meet them, they're together, and then all through present day they're just not together, but you don't know why,
Yeah.
and they obviously don't hate each other.
Yeah.
And I just thought that was something like, yeah, you can leave that unsaid and
Mhm.
like a bit underdeveloped because it's just an interesting element to this thing.
Yeah. And that's one of those things where I'm like, all right, was there like a thing here about like something that's very real in the First Nations community, which is like, oh, she probably couldn't stay with him because of alcoholism or something like that, in the degree of like now he's clean, it's like now he can start back up again. Like and like that to me is interesting, right? It sucks that they're just like, no, we have to make everyone palatable, but they're separated, but there's no real indication or reason why, but they're still, like you said, friendly towards each other.
I think she just wasn't that serious about him. I don't know
Uh,
if there has to be anything traumatic or visceral about why they're not together. I think she's just like, yeah, it was fun hooking up with you. I went through a big
and
deal.
having a family with you and having grandkids and all that kind of stuff. Like, really?
No, he's not. He was just a boyfriend. Like, he was just hooking up with it.
Oh, really?
They weren't married. That's not like
Oh,
Maya's
okay.
mom isn't his daughter.
Oh, okay. I very much. This is how
Yeah,
checked out of this show I really it was, and that's my fault. That I'm glad you clarified that for me.
yeah. That's what I'm saying. Like that was interesting. That is like showing like,
Yeah.
yeah, like you could just date someone for a time. Like you don't have to stay together just because like, and there is stuff that I can read into it. Like, yeah, once her daughter died, she probably was like, I'm shutting myself off to that kind of stuff right now.
That's very true.
And
Yeah.
maybe he just was always hoping the sewing machine, like hoping you come back for me, hoping you come back for the sewing machine. And she's like, yes, but not like before.
You
Like,
know what? In all honesty, what you just said makes a lot of sense to me. It's like, yeah, her daughter died. She was very emotionally unavailable, and he wasn't getting what he needed out of the relationship, and therefore they separated and still kept in each other alive. That is that's a good point. Yeah. Okay. Uh, I like that a little bit better for sure, but yeah, and this is why I'm like they slotted Kingpin into this because at no point in time did Kingpin have any relationships with any other of the family members or
yeah,
pose a
like he
threat to
meets the
them.
grandmother like when she's at Scully's place. But
Yeah, but at no
I was just
point
like,
am I convinced that they knew, like Will Fisk knew that this is the grandmother because I was like, partially I'm like, are you kidnapping her right now? Is that
I
what's
think he did
happening?
know. I think
And
that's what sets up. Mm, I think he did. I don't think he went into it knowing it, but I think he was like, "Oh, this is a freebie.
yeah,
I know who your grandmother is now.
yeah.
I know a pain point I can press."
Yeah, it felt weird because I'm like the moment that happened, I'm like, I'm full on expecting this to happen, and then it just doesn't, and I'm just like,
Well, it
what's the
happens
point
at
of
the
this
end, but
scene?
again, you just by the time it happens, I'm like, so Bonnie just gets kidnapped. That's her thing in this show.
Yeah,
Like, no, she didn't help. I don't know.
which is consistent with Fisk because you're just like, oh yeah, that's your trump card. Cool, I get that. Like, I get
I
that. Like,
just,
that's
yeah, yeah, the Bonnie stuff really bummed me out. I still don't have
oh
to talk
yeah,
about it anymore. It's just a real bummer.
yeah. It was weird because it felt like, oh, cool. This is what is it? What's her from What If? Her
Kahori,
character. Uh, what's that?
Kahori.
Kahori. Yes, that's it. Thank you. Because she's the one that voices Kahori.
Hmm.
So it was this weird situation where I'm like, okay, did they get into an uncomfortable position for casting where they're like, oh crap, we also kind of need to use you in a live action. No, so what are we gonna do? And I'm like, you introduced the multiverse already. Why is it that
Yeah,
like you can't have the same actor do Kahori and then be Bonnie? It just doesn't make sense to me. It's so weird, man.
yeah. 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 I think I don't know who she would have gone up against, but like maybe if I don't want to rewrite the show. I just think yes, I agree. I think the kingpin of it all detracted from what could have been a better story.
Yeah, yeah. It it really took away from everything because it's like, well, what is she actually fighting now? She doesn't. It, it's just weird because, and I will say this: the healing thing that Maya does to Fisk, I'm just like, what did you do? What did you actually
Yeah, I
do?
don't have any. I just assume based on having watched things that that is what she did. That she just healed. I shouldn't say healed because I don't think it's going to be a permanent thing. What I think she did was she gave him a timeout, and he was forced to like actually interrogate his own decisions,
Here's a timeout.
and
Um,
which is something a lot of people don't do. So it shook him up for a bit, enough for him to be like, "Let's get out of here. I don't like that she can do this to me." But
yeah. So
it doesn't. I don't get the sense that he's like, and that's the last time I'll ever see her. I will never bother her again.
So that's the weird thing, right? Because my assumption was like, oh, she literally healed his childhood trauma. So he's not evil anymore. And
Mm,
so, and then when it gets to the mid-credit scene where you're like, oh, he gets the idea to be mayor and all that kind of stuff. It's really weird because it's just like, okay, are they setting up a redemption arc for Fisk in the idea that, oh, he's healed because she healed him. So he's actually trying to use his power and influence as a mayor for good, in which case I'm like, that is the worst. Like,
no,
that's
that's not what they were doing.
awful. I really hope that's not what they're
No,
doing.
I don't think any comic book character becoming mayor has been a good thing.
Yeah, it's never been a good
I
thing.
don't even think in real life mayors use their power to do good things.
No, they
So
don't. They
so
smoke
yeah,
crack.
I think he just saw a way to do a power grab again.
Yeah, yeah. It's weird because yeah, like on the Wikipedia, the IMDb, they're like, oh yeah, she uses her power to heal him of his trauma and let go of his anger. I'm like, is that
Yeah,
is
I
that
mean,
what happened? It
that's
makes
I
me
mean
feel
I
like she
think
healed his
yes
eye more than anything else,
for
which should have been
ease.
at toward the earlier part of the series.
She
Like, oh yeah,
definitely should
you're.
have just healed his eye right away.
I agree, a
If
hundred
if they
percent.
were like if they were so scared of having him have an eye patch through this,
Yeah,
just
it's
just heal his
he
eye.
healed the friggin' eye, and it's like,
Um, yeah,
because then you're just putting it all on like people of color to hold up white men
well, I
again.
didn't like that at all. Don't
Yeah,
get me
I
wrong.
hated that. I'm just like, why is and I would be. I'm just like, oh man, the whole the Sidney Freeland of it all. Like that must have been such a bad way to end this whole thing. Because when I saw that, I was like, no, no.
Yeah, I don't think it's a permanent thing, obviously, but it's
Hmm.
for the point of this show. Yeah, it also kind of reminded me of how I felt about how the Daredevil fight ended. I'm like, wouldn't he tie her up and be like, "Go get her, cop"? Like, what? He just ran away. Like they're like, Maya fights these men and then they run away, and I'm like, I mean, I I I buy Fisk running away more than Daredevil running away.
Oh, 100%.
I think Fisk as I said, I think they're doing a Thanos Gamora thing, and so I think Fisk is like, yeah, I wanted to scare her, but I also don't want to kill her. I'm not gonna be the one unless I can get an Infinity Stone out of it. I'm not gonna kill her. I just need to like, I just want her to be scared enough to keep doing what I want her to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and
so I can see him being like, that's not happening today. I gotta get out of here.
yeah,
But yeah, I was kind of just like, why would Daredevil run? Like, I can't think of any hero that's like, okay, they're down, I'm out. Like, I feel like it would be like, tie them up like Spider-Man does all the time, Batman does it. Like, you kind of just, make sure they can't leave the area, and
yeah.
like, and the cops will do the rest. I'm out.
And I feel like anytime that's been the case, like in She-Hulk, there's consequences to those actions in which they come back more powerful, and then they keep doing the same thing. In which case, it's like, yeah, you shouldn't have let them go. That's
but
the
it's
lesson
like a
of that story.
decision they make of like, I feel like you learned your lesson. Whereas I don't remember the actual shot. I've seen it twice, but it felt like he kind of like throws the shelf on her, and he's like, "Gotta get out of here, bye."
Yeah, it's like, I'm experiencing feelings for the first time again.
Yeah.
It's just very ineffective. It's very, and it's just like on the plane. Oh my god, the way that dialogue was being delivered by the news anchor, it's like, it feels like anyone in like even the criminal,
the bare knuckle brawler thing. I was like, that sounds like
so
Matt Murdock's dad you're talking about, not
yeah.
Kingpin. But Kingpin's like, that's me. I'm a bare knuckle brawler.
He's like, I've done these things before. It's like, okay, sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't love that mid-credit scene.
It's bad.
And I one thing I did like, I know it's been a lot of me saying stuff, but I did like when she called Kingpin to task for being like, that shit you put in my eyes just so you don't have to learn how to sign. Like, you don't actually care about me.
Yes.
Like, because in contrast, all of her family members still sign, or like friends and family still sign.
Yeah. Yeah. And I did
like,
like
you
that
don't
call
actually
out.
care about me.
100% I like that call out. Like, you didn't care enough to learn this. It's been years. You've never have, and all that kind of stuff, which is 100% true. I'm like, that's a thing. Like, if he had bothered to learn how to sign and all that kind of stuff, I'm like, okay, this just got a little bit more interesting, right? But he doesn't, and you're just like, oh, there's nothing that convinces me. It makes me think less of this Kingpin, because it's just like, what, you couldn't find other people to be your goons and like have other superhero power stuff, and like do something that
they
way.
Are just trying to show that he does. I don't want to say care. He is invested in Maya.
Invested is a good word.
She means more to him than just muscle.
Yes. Yes.
So in that sense, no, he can't just get anyone else.
Right.
He says like, I'm not training anymore, but we're still gonna have our Sunday dinners. Like, he does want her in his life. It's just, yeah.
He needs it for selfish reasons.
I know this is also a nitpick, but when he's putting the contact in her eye, the goons are acting like giddy, like they're gonna kill her, or he's gonna like disfigure her. I'm like, but you know what he's going to do. Like, this, you're not acting the right way in the scene.
It was the weirdest sell of all time. It's like, okay,
yeah,
dude, we're gonna mess her up. No, here's a contact lens, baby. And then just dry shove that thing in.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Brutal. Just absolutely brutal stuff here.
Yeah. What else? Well, yeah, I thought the Henry character was interesting. I guess he's Black Crow, which is a superhero with the comic.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I doubt they're going to explore that, though.
In this, but
yeah.
Yeah. They still use the name, which is interesting.
I do like that actor.
Yeah, because I think this is well acted for the most part.
Yeah. Yeah, he does a lot of expressive stuff with his face, and I really am a big fan of it. Very, very big fan. We talked about Chula. She's absolutely amazing in this. She's one of the more complex characters that just doesn't get enough to do, which is a shame. Again, the Bonnie thing is just egregious. It's terrible that they just shafted her.
I love that actor, so this is not about me being like, oh, she did a bad job.
No,
it's they
didn't give her anything to do.
Performance to shit, and in general, it doesn't feel like there was going to be a lot for her to do anyway. But I think even what she did do was cut down.
Yeah. Biscuits is just dumb.
I don't like again. He is
What's the
good. I
point?
don't think he's in the same show as everyone else
He's not.
for different reasons. But
Yeah.
I like he's not doing a bad job of
Mhm.
like I would put that more on the director for not kind of guiding him through how his performance will interact with the other performances.
They're like, we need you to be the comic relief, so just
Yeah, and I think
do
that's
your
what
thing, man. And I'm
yeah,
like,
instead of being
why?
like, hey, you see how they're here and you're all the way up here. Like,
Yeah, you're like not matching the vibe at all. Like it's weird. It's so weird, and especially that second episode, like that second episode, like, I need you to do this. Like my grandma doesn't let me off road this, and I'm just like, well, what's happening here? Like this is
yeah.
so
I mean,
silly.
as I said, everything he did should have been Bonnie.
It
Like,
should have been 100%.
and obviously it wouldn't happen as fast, but that would have been the satisfying thing of even watching Maya use some like kingpin tactics on Bonnie to get her to
Yes.
do it, and then having to deal with holy shit, look at what I've become.
I think it would have been successful to have Bonnie do the biscuit stuff in the sense where it's just like, listen, you showed up. We're gonna have to have a conversation at some point, but I need you now. I need you to do this. That to me builds so much more tension, and it would have been so great that payoff that when they did have the conversation, but obviously a better conversation when they actually wrote down, because this was just a situation where it was not
Also, I
good.
feel like she was a firefighter, but that doesn't really factor into anything. Like,
No, it didn't factor
she
into
doesn't do
anything at
anything.
all.
Yeah, because they're saying she got powers at the end. So even the physicality at the end, I'm like, but that's because she's got superpowers. It's
Yeah.
not because she's using her training as a firefighter.
Yeah, and
Like, no, yeah, it just felt like what was even the point of setting her up so heavily at the beginning if you didn't really want her to do anything?
yeah, it's one of those things where I think I'm like, okay, this is the highlight reel of the most important stuff that they needed
Yeah.
to do, and then they didn't actually get to any spot that was earned through anything. So I'm sure that had to do with the one episode that got cut, and everything like that. At least I hope it was, where it's like, oh, okay, she's finally gonna do family stuff and get on the same page as everyone. And unfortunately, it didn't happen at all. It was just like, no, we're good now. She's back in town. Cool. That's it. She's like, ugh, it's rough. I mean, like, I'm glad this exists, but it needed. I wish it had the justice, um, to have the vision, the original vision, sought out more, and less interference from the studio heads, to be like, maybe we just need to make something that is authentic as opposed to catering to the feelings of the white people, and how they would be not painted well in a show like this at all. I'm like,
Or even
completely
if
fine.
you just completely remove them from this, like,
Yeah.
so that, yeah. I mean, anyway, I think that yeah, I want to just restate. I don't think this show is objectively bad. I think it didn't work for me, and the people it worked for, I'm genuinely happy, and I think those voices should be elevated because obviously they saw stuff I didn't see that would be worth exploring and would help me understand it better. Having said that, let's rate it.
Yeah, I'm very much with you on that. I wish the show had the ability to be true to its roots, and where it originally came from. Do you want to go first?
Yeah, I'll rate it. I'm gonna give it a 6.5.
I'm doing a 5 on this. It's just it got chopped up into too many things that I just didn't appreciate. I would have loved to see the original version of what this was supposed to be.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it didn't give me yeah, I agree with you. It felt tampered with, but it also just, I don't know, like we've seen shows that we know technically weren't tampered with that had similar story issues, so it just also, yeah, it was hit with too many things, and as I said, there was just the two big things that really didn't work for me, that brought it down. But that doesn't mean it's objectively bad or that I don't think there's anything to mine from it. I just didn't see it, and I'm actively looking for people who did see it and can help elucidate that material.
Right. I'm very much with you on that. I'm glad it exists for those people that like it. I just don't know enough about the history, and I don't know enough about. And I do know that but I do know about good storytelling, and this was just not it.
Well, there you have it.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for listening, everybody. We're part of the That Shelf Podcast Network with other great shows like Bad Game Movies, Contra Zoom Pod, and Springfield Googleplex. So please go to thatshelf.com. You'll find those shows, our show, and more shows. And if you want to hear older episodes of Spoiled Rotten, please go to tdfeverything.com/spoiledrotten, or we're on all sorts of podcast platforms. So choose the one you like, rate, review, subscribe, share with your friends, follow, do all that great stuff. And if you need to get in touch with us and let us know what you thought of this series and what we missed, please do. Our email is spoiledpodcast@gmail.com, and we are at TDF Spoiled on Threads, Twitter, and Instagram. All right. Bye-bye.
Cheers.
This has been a TDF Everything production, brah.